Released at the end of 2021, Fusion Strike was the 8th Sword and Shield set in the Pokemon trading card game. To date, it is the biggest set ever released with 264 cards before secret rares. And this one kind of has a mixed reception within the Pokemon trading card game community. It is not necessarily jam-packed with great competitive cards. It isn't necessarily the best in terms of collectible cards, but I think it has some of the best in both. And we're not going to talk about like the alt arts or anything. Yes, there's an alt art Gengar that's awesome that I should have pulled up beforehand. Unfortunately, I don't have it here. But from a gameplay perspective, we're going to cover all of the noteworthy cards from this set. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and before we get into Fusion Strike, I did want to mention that I also stream on Twitch, which I'm doing right now. And for everybody in the Twitch chat right now, say hi to YouTube. You can say hello, and their messages are going to appear over here. You could be hanging out with us live every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Fusion Strike is a kind of a top-heavy set. But the big thing is it introduced the fighting style of Fusion Strike, where Pokemon are kind of working together. Single Strike was about like singular Pokemon hitting really hard. Rapid Strike was about not hitting as hard, but having movement and fluidity. Fusion Strike was like a team effort of Pokemon working together. And that was best signified by Mew VMAX, which has 310 HP and Cross Fusion Strike for only 2 colorless energy. Choose one of your bench Fusion Strike Pokemon's attacks and use it as its attack. You could copy some crazy moves, including Genesect's Techno Blast to hit for 210 damage, Meloetta's Melodious Echo, 70 damage for each Fusion Strike energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. As 2 of the big ones, and when you copied Meloetta's attack, you could hit for up to 280 damage before power tablets, before choice belts. Mew VMAX had the potential to one-hit KO everything in the game, or just hit for just enough damage. You could also even copy Psychic Leap for 70 damage and shuffle this Pokemon and all attached cards into your deck. So if you had a damaged Mew VMAX, you could just hit, take a KO, 70, maybe even more if you used other modifiers, and then just take the Mew VMAX off the board, and now your opponent can't take those 3 prizes anymore. Absolutely ridiculous. And when this first came out, it was the big deck, considered one of, if not the most broken deck of all time. And even now, with V-Stars being introduced into the game and Lugia being in the game, Mew VMAX is at worst a top 3, top 4 deck, and it's still incredibly strong, has been incredibly strong this whole time. And post-rotation, when it looks like Lugia is going to be knocked down a peg or 2, Mew VMAX is probably going to continue to be really strong and one of the best decks in the game, and likely until it disappears. Like, it's crazy how strong this is, because Pokemon have even put in cards to counter Mew. They put in Mightyena that can knock this out for no energy. They put in Drapion V, which is basically just, you put the card in, you don't have to evolve, you just drop it in and take 3 prizes off of Mew VMAX. And it's still not enough to slow down Mew VMAX. What an awesome deck. And what makes the deck awesome on top of Mew VMAX is Genesect V. You're probably never going to attack with Genesect, but its Fusion Strike ability is absolutely ridiculous. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have as many cards in your hand as you have Fusion Strike Pokemon in play. If you have 6 Fusion Strike Pokemon on the board, you draw 6 cards. Then you play some cards, you use another Genesect, draw again, and you're usually getting 3 Genesects on the board, and you're able to draw 20, 30 cards in one go. It's absolutely insane. One of the best draw engines the game has ever seen. And copying its Technoblast was a great great addition to Mew as well. Meloetta, one of the biggest nightmares in the modern era of the game, with its Melodious Echo attack, where you can do up to 280 damage if you've got all four Fusion Strike energy on the board. But the scariest thing is if you're going second, you've got Meloetta in the active, you use Alessa Sparkle to attach 2 Fusion Strike energy, then attach a third one, and you're hitting for 210 damage before modifiers. You can knock out your opponent's Pokemon V in the active on the first turn and instantly take 2 prizes. And there were so many decks that just could not handle that type of turn 1 pressure that you just won. There were a lot of games you would win with the turn 1 going second Meloetta. Absolutely bonkers card. Rounding out the Pokemon in the Fusion Strike in the main Mew deck was Oricorio. Not everybody played the Oricorio, but it's really handy thanks to its Lesson in Zeal ability, which makes your Fusion Strike Pokemon take 20 less damage. If you've got this on the board, Mightyena cannot one-hit KO you, and among other things that just can't one-hit KO Mew VMAX because the Oricorio is on the board. Pretty nifty. The antithesis to Mew VMAX at the time was Gengar VMAX. It was an incredibly efficient attacker for Fear and Panic for 2 Dark Energy, does 60 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon V and Pokemon GX in play, and against Mew VMAX, you pretty much just one-hit KO the entirety of that deck, no problem. And you could accelerate this with Houndoom to get the single strike energy on there, do even more damage, and then Gmax Swallow Up is 250 damage, and during your next turn, Gengar VMAX can't attack, but with hiding energy, you could just quickly rotate it in and out with a fresh Gengar. You could put single strike energy on here to put the damage output even higher, so it could hit for north of 300. And Gengar had the ability to potentially one-hit KO pretty much anything in the game as well. Unfortunately, Single Strike and Gengar have kind of fallen off a cliff, even in a world where Mew VMAX is once again popular. But it might see some signs of life here. I know some people are playing Gengar in their Lugia decks, and maybe that's the kick that it needs. But we'll see. Gengar, for a time, was very strong, and it's not too late for Gengar to find some use elsewhere. All of the Galarian starters did get V and VMAX Pokemon in Single Strike. The Rillaboom and the Cinderace are nothing to write home about, but Teleon VMAX was a deck for a while. It does have the ability Double Gunner, where you discard a water energy and you do drop 2 damage counters on 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. It's an interesting snipe attack, but the big thing was Gmax Spiral for 70 damage, 1 water, colorless. You do 70 damage, and if you put an energy from your hand or from your Pokemon back into your hand, you do another 70 damage for 140. 140 is not bad, but you get Rapid Strike energy, which is 2 energy. You attach it, you use the attack, you take it back, and then you only have to attach the 1 energy over and over again to keep hitting for 140. And in between, as long as you can survive the next hit, you could then play Cheryl, heal Teleon, and then attach the energy again, and then keep that loop going. And for a little bit, it was okay, but in the world of V-Star Pokemon and stuff that hits really hard, like a Palkia, like a Giratina, like a Lugia, Teleon VMAX has kind of fallen off the face of the earth, but there could be some potential with having this deck just being super tanky and healing over and over again. Krablominable is a card that got a little bit of play here and there thanks to its Destroyer Punch attack. Does 90 damage, plus it does 60 damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So the idea behind Krablominable is that you do some damage with something else, and then you have Krablominable come in to clean up the mess. It's a little clunky, especially the fact that it costs 3 energy to use, but this was a card that got used in like Frostmoth box decks, and even got a little bit of play in Palkia as well. Serena didn't get much play in Standard, but in Expanded, Serena, I have heard, is a queen. thanks to its move Queen's Orders, does 20 damage, and you may discard any number of your bench Pokemon. This attack does 40 more damage for each bench Pokemon you discarded this way. So you're just throwing Pokemon at your opponent, doing a couple hundred damage potentially. And I don't know how to make this card work in Expanded. I don't play Expanded at all, but I've heard this is very good in that format. Greedent VMAX it's a tantalizing card. It's a tantalizing card because of its turn a profit attack for 2 colorless energy. If your opponent's basic Pokemon is knocked out by damage from this attack, take 2 more prize cards. So you could just take out a Sobble, right? You put the sponge gloves on there for 30 more damage. You take out a Sobble and you take 3 prizes. And I've seen people try and make this card work here and there. I think it's a little too cheeky to make work with any sort of consistency, but it's a pretty cool combo to make work if you can pull it off. Hoopa V technically came out during the Evolving Skies era, but we did get the full art in Fusion Strike, and I can't remember if we talked about it in the Evolving Skies video, but we should flag it here because Hoopa V is a interesting Pokemon. It has the ability Two-Faced, which allows it to be Psychic and Dark type, and there was a stretch where Mew VMAX and Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX were the 2 best decks in the game, and Hoopa could hit both of them for weakness at the same time, which made this card like the go-to tech card for like 2 weeks in the competitive scene. I ran this card as part of an Arceus Lucario Hoopa deck, and that's still one of my all-time favorite decks to play. Dunsparce is a card that we see a lot now, but at the time, it didn't have a lot of use. Its Mysterious Nest ability turns weakness off for colorless Pokemon, but at the time, colorless Pokemon were not relevant. It wasn't until the next set with Brilliant Stars where we really saw Dunsparce come to shine. This card, Deoxys, is really fascinating because it is Fusion Strike, Single Strike, and Rapid Strike all in one. And it has the attack Photon Boost where it does 80 damage. Plus, if your Pokemon has any Fusion Strike, if this Pokemon has any Fusion Strike energy attached, this does 80 more damage. For a single prize attacker that can hit for up to 160, but Mew decks would run this. You'd use double colorless to cover the other 2 energy. Hit for 140 with a single prize attacker. It's not bad. Butterfree is an interesting card when paired with the right combination. There's also a Metapod that quickly evolves, and you could pull off tricolored scales. When your Pokemon... When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon burned, confused, and poisoned. And you'd pair this with like Salazzle, which would do 70 damage for each condition affecting your opponent's Pokemon. And Salazzle would hit for 270 damage when you could pull the Butterfree combo off, which was ridiculous. It never got that far in competitive play, but if you wanted a single prize Mimi deck, this was kind of it. Gore didn't really get off the ground, but I did want to flag other Fusion Strike Pokemon because it's not just Mew VMAX. No one plays anything except the Mew version, and for good reason. But Gore was kind of interesting, where Ninja Tornado does 120 damage, but if you moved it from the bench to the active, this attack can be used for 1 grass energy. So the whole point of the deck was to have multiple Gores rotating back and forth, hitting for 120 damage again and again. Unfortunately, it's just not enough damage to keep up with the meta. Dragapult was another Fusion Strike attacker where for only 1 energy, Fusion Strike Assault does 30 damage for each of your Fusion Strike Pokemon in play. So you would get a couple Genesect down, you get some Dragapults down, and then you could potentially hit for 180 off of 1 energy. Throw a Choice Belt on there. At 210, you're KOing Pokemon V, some of the Pokemon V at that point. It's an interesting idea, but it never really came to fruition. Stage 2 Pokemon are a nightmare to deal with in this format. And this just wasn't quick enough or efficient enough to really shine. Did you know this card actually got top 32 at a major tournament? I actually can't remember which one. It was in South America where someone was playing the Ahriyama deck, And they were able to get to day 2, top 32. And they were able to do that thanks to this Guts ability, where if this Pokemon would be knocked out by damage from an attack, flip a coin. If heads, this Pokemon is not knocked out and its remaining HP becomes 10. So you do 100 damage, you use single strike energy, you can get this up to 160. And if you can tank multiple turns with the Ahriyama, yeah, you could high roll and get a couple of cheeky wins here and there. And it was enough for this player to get into the top 32 at a major tournament. More Pico was in many a single strike deck back in the day, even with Urshifu and Umbreon could easily one-hit KO Mew VMAX, but more Pico with its explosive discontent. This attack does 30 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. There were ways of increasing more Pico's HP through the cape, through, I think it's the Abomasnow also raises HP. You could put in the multiple single strike energies to do more damage. This could one-hit KO Mew VMAX, and you were crazy up trading with more Pico, which made it an interesting secondary attacker. For like a week or so, Latias was a regular inclusion in the Mew VMAX deck, mostly for its ability or its move Dyna Barrier, where you do 70 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from Pokemon VMAX. So Mew would copy this attack, do 70 damage, and then not take any damage from VMAX attackers. This was a little more viable in the Fusion Strike era when there were no V-Stars that could just hit around this. However, once players figured out that Meloetta was just the better option, then Latias just disappeared. Blissey and a number of baby Pokemon had their own meme deck, and it was the Let's All Roll Out deck, all powered by Blissey, which had the ability, expert in roundness, prevent all damage done to each of your Pokemon that has the Let's All Roll Out attack by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon VMAX. So VMAX decks would get shut down, couldn't attack any of Blissey or the other baby Pokemon, and then you would do okay damage with Let's All Roll Out, but this deck never really went anywhere. Toxicity was another Fusion Strike Pokemon that got a little bit of experimentation very early on because its maximum downer ability brings the HP of VMAX down by 30. And if you have multiple Toxicities on the board, it actually stacks to lower their HP even lower. But again, once people found the money combination of Fusion Strike cards, this one disappeared. Adventurer's Discovery was introduced in Fusion Strike, and it lets you grab up to 3 Pokemon V, reveal them, and put them into your hand. This was really handy in certain decks such as Shadow Rider or even V-Union decks because you could grab Vs or V-Maxes or V-Stars or V-Union pieces with this. So this was a really handy card in a couple of decks. Battle VIP Pass has become such a prominent card, not just in Mew VMAX, but many decks that rely on having good starts. Battle VIP Pass allows you to search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench, but you can only use this card on your first turn, which makes it a big gamble from the moment you sit at the table. And if you've got a couple of these in your deck, regardless of the risk reward, there are a number of decks that have 4 of these there because it's worth it to them to have that big start. Krammatic, another handy card that only really is used in Mew VMAX, but some other decks could benefit from this as well. You have to discard a item card, flip a coin, and if you hit heads, you can grab any card from your deck and put it into your hand. This was a really handy card for getting that missing combo piece or getting the stadium to get out of Path to the Peak. Whatever the case is, Krammatic is a 4 of in every Mew VMAX deck. And this card's actually crazy expensive in Japan because this was a limited time promo card. And I've heard that Krammatic is like a $70 card. And that's absolutely crazy. So I'm glad that the English ones are a lot cheaper. Alessa's Sparkle, another big card for the Mew deck, allows you to attach 2 Fusion Strike energy, 1 to each Pokemon of your choice, and combining this with Melodious Echo allowed you to hit crazy damage numbers fast. One big item in the Fusion Strike arsenal, Power Tablets. They were like there was an electric one in the Sun and Moon era, but Power Tablets gave you plus 30 damage on Fusion Strike Pokemon. Mew would use these to hit the damage numbers it needs to take one-hit KOs on pretty much anything it wants. And last but not least, Fusion Strike Energy. You want to get a bunch of these on the board so Meloetta or Mew could use the Melodious Echo attack, but it also has the added benefit of protecting your Pokemon from effects of your opponent's Pokemon's abilities. So stuff like Galarian Zigzagoon doesn't work. Umbreon's Gusting ability doesn't work. It didn't need that, but it made Fusion Strike even more busted. That concludes our look at the Fusion Strike era of the Pokemon trading card game. Again, from a collector standpoint, it's not necessarily the greatest, and even players aren't the biggest fans of Fusion Strike for one reason or another, especially if you hate Mew. If you hate Mew, you absolutely loathe this set. But I personally love Mew VMAX, and this is one of my favorite sets because of that. Let me know what your favorite set is in the comments of this video. And thank you so much for watching. Before we go, some quick plugs. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In Third Person. You can find me on Twitch at In Third Person, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, like I am right now. Everybody in the chat, you got one more time to say goodbye to YouTube. And yeah, check out the website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits there. Yeah, Besh is saying goodbye to you guys. So let's get out of here. I will see you all later. Stream, don't go away. I know I'm going to put the goodbye screen up. This is for YouTube and not for you guys. All right. See ya, everybody. Bye-bye.